Let me tell you a story about power, ambition, and betrayal. My name is Lila Torres, and if there's one thing I've learned in my 34 years of living, it's that life has an uncanny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. I'm sitting here now, staring at the city skyline from my tiny apartment window, replaying everything that led me to this moment. The moment where I went from being just another cog in the corporate machine to someone who might just have the chance to rewrite her own narrative. I worked for Crestwood Industries, one of those sprawling conglomerates that everyone knows, but no one really understands what they do beyond business solutions. It sounds vague because it is vague. The truth is, we sold products ranging from office supplies to software systems, all wrapped up in a shiny package of promises to make your company run smoother than ever before. And let me tell you, working there wasn't some glamorous 9-to-5 gig. It was more like a 12-hour marathon with occasional breaks for coffee and existential crises. For 6 long years, I poured every ounce of myself into that place. 6 years of late nights, missed birthdays, and weekends spent hunched over spreadsheets instead of enjoying brunch with friends. Why? Because I believe in the dream, or maybe because I didn't know any better. Either way, I thought hard work would pay off eventually. That's what they always say, right? Put your head down, grind away, and someday you'll get noticed. Someday, you'll climb the ladder and find yourself standing tall among the executives whose names are etched on glass doors. But here's the kicker. While I was busy chasing that elusive promotion, someone else was quietly building their empire right under my nose. Someone younger, flashier, and let's face it, richer. Her name was Chloe Hartwell, and she wasn't just any ordinary employee. No, Chloe happened to be the daughter of our CEO, Richard Hartwell. She had walked into Crestwood 3 years ago fresh out of business school, armed with a degree from Harvard and enough confidence to light up Times Square. From day one, she was treated differently, not subtly either. Everyone knew who she was, and everyone wanted to be on her good side. At first, I didn't think much of her. Sure, she had charisma and charm, but so did plenty of other people in the office. What set her apart, though, was her knack for sales. While most of us were stuck trying to meet quotas, Chloe breezed past hers like they were nothing. Within months, she'd landed deals that took seasoned veterans years to secure. By the end of her second year, whispers started spreading through the hallways. Chloe had crossed $100 million in sales. $100 million. Let that sink in for a second. Meanwhile, I was still stuck in middle management, juggling endless reports and managing teams that barely acknowledged my existence. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't jealous of Chloe. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly I admired her. She had drive, ambition, and a fire inside her that made people sit up and take notice. If anything, she inspired me to push harder, to aim higher, or at least, that's what I told myself. Then came the day everything changed. It started innocently enough, a meeting called by HR late on a Friday afternoon. Nothing unusual about that, right? Except when I walked into the conference room, I found myself face to face not only with HR but also with Richard Hartwell himself. His expression said it all before he even opened his mouth. There was no small talk, no attempt to soften the blow. He simply informed me that my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. Restructuring. Such a sterile word for such a devastating reality. As I packed at my desk later that evening, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years of loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication, and this was how it ended, with a severance package and a pat on the back. Meanwhile, Chloe was upstairs celebrating her latest $1 million deal, probably sipping champagne in the executive lounge. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, getting fired while the boss's daughter soared to new heights. The next few weeks were a blur of job applications, networking events, and sleepless nights spent questioning every decision I'd ever made. I felt like a failure, like I'd somehow missed the memo on how to succeed in this cutthroat world. But then, out of nowhere, the phone rang. It was the board of directors, at least, someone claiming to speak on their behalf. They wanted to see me, urgently. Now, as I sit here waiting for whatever comes next, I can't help but wonder, is this a second chance? Or just another twist in the tangled web of corporate politics? Whatever it is, I know one thing for sure, I'm done playing by other people's rules. This time, I'm writing my own script. The meeting with the board turned out to be unexpected, to say the least. When I arrived at the sleek high-rise downtown, I half expected to walk into yet another sterile conference room filled with suits and judgmental stares. Instead, I was ushered into a private lounge overlooking the city, complete with plush leather chairs and a bar stocked with top-shelf liquor. For a moment, I wondered if I'd stumbled into the wrong place. Surely, this wasn't how these things usually went. There were 3 of them waiting for me, members of the board I vaguely recognized from company-wide meetings. 2 men and a woman, each exuding an air of authority that made me instinctively straighten my posture. They greeted me warmly, almost too warmly, offering me a drink before diving into the reason for my summons. "Miss Torres," the woman began, her voice smooth and measured, "we understand you recently parted ways with Crestwood Industries." I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was headed. "That's correct." She exchanged a glance with the others, before continuing. "We're aware of the circumstances surrounding your departure, and frankly, we believe it was mishandled. Your contributions to the company over the years have not gone unnoticed, despite what recent events may suggest." Her words caught me off guard. Not unnoticed? Then why had I been fired without so much as a thank you note? Before I could respond, one of the men chimed in. "You see, Miss Torres, Crestwood is at a crossroads. We've grown rapidly under Richard Hartwell's leadership, but growth often comes with growing pains. One of those pains has been the imbalance between innovation and tradition within the company. Some members of the board, including ourselves, feel that the current direction is unsustainable." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. "And what does this have to do with me?" The third member, a wiry man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "It has everything to do with you. You've been a steady presence at Crestwood for years, someone who understands both its strengths and its weaknesses. More importantly, you're not afraid to challenge the status quo, a quality that's sorely lacking among many of our senior leaders." Their flattery was disarming, but I wasn't about to let my guard down completely. "Forgive me, but I don't understand why you're telling me this. I'm no longer part of the company." The woman smiled faintly, as if she'd anticipated my skepticism. "What if we told you there's an opportunity to return, not as an employee but as a consultant? Specifically, to help us address certain concerns regarding the leadership structure." My heart skipped a beat. Leadership structure? Were they implying what I thought they were implying? "Are you suggesting—" "We're suggesting," the first man interrupted, his tone firm yet diplomatic, "that Richard Hartwell's tenure as CEO may be coming to an end sooner rather than later. The board is divided on the matter, but there's a faction that believes change is necessary for the company's survival. We need someone with insider knowledge and integrity to guide us through this transition." It took every ounce of self-control not to laugh. Me? Guide them through ousting the CEO? The same CEO whose daughter had overshadowed me at every turn? If this wasn't corporate revenge served cold, I didn't know what was. Still, I couldn't deny the allure of the proposition. This was my chance to reclaim some semblance of control, to prove that I wasn't just another disposable cog in the machine. But it wouldn't come without risks. Taking on something like this meant stepping into a battlefield where alliances shifted daily, and trust was a rare commodity. What exactly would this role entail? I asked carefully, trying to gauge their intentions. The woman clasped her hands together, her demeanor shifting slightly. "Your primary task would be to gather evidence, data, testimonies, anything that highlights areas where current leadership has faltered. We're not asking you to fabricate anything, mind you, just to shine a light on the truth." "And what happens after that?" I pressed, needing to hear them say it outright. "If your findings support our case," the wiry man replied, "we'll move forward with a formal vote to remove Richard Hartwell as CEO. Of course, this will require discretion and finesse. If word gets out prematurely, it could jeopardize the entire operation." I sat back in my chair, processing everything they'd said. On paper, it sounded straightforward. Collect information, present it to the board, and watch the dominoes fall. But in practice, it would be anything but simple. Every step I took would be scrutinized, every decision weighed against potential consequences. And then there was Chloe. How would she react if her father's reign came crashing down? Would she see me as the architect of his downfall? Despite the uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was desperation, but something deep inside me whispered that this was my moment to fight back, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd ever been overlooked, undervalued, or pushed aside. "I'll do it," I said finally, surprising even myself with how resolute I sounded. The trio exchanged satisfied glances, clearly pleased with my response. "Excellent," the woman said, extending her hand. "Welcome aboard, Miss Torres. Together, we'll ensure that Crestwood thrives, not just for today, but for the future." As I shook her hand, I couldn't help but wonder, was I walking into a trap, or was this truly the beginning of something bigger? Only time would tell. Over the next several weeks, I threw myself into the task at hand with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. Armed with a list of key individuals to interview and access to internal documents I'd never dreamed of seeing, I began piecing together a portrait of Crestwood that was far more complex and troubling than I'd imagined. One of the first people I spoke to was Marcus Rivera, a longtime CFO who'd been with the company since its early days. Over lunch at a quiet cafe, he opened up about the mounting pressure from shareholders to prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. "Richard's great at making bold moves," Marcus admitted, stirring his coffee absently, "but sometimes those moves aren't sustainable. He pushes too hard, too fast, and doesn't always consider the fallout." Other conversations revealed similar patterns. Projects rushed to completion without proper oversight, budgets slashed in favor of flashy marketing campaigns, and talented employees driven away by toxic workplace culture. Each story added another layer to the picture I was painting, one that painted Richard Hartwell as a visionary leader whose ambition often blinded him to the consequences of his actions. But gathering evidence wasn't the only challenge I faced. Word spread quickly that I was back in the fold, albeit in a mysterious capacity, and soon I found myself navigating a minefield of gossip and speculation. Some colleagues welcomed me warmly, eager to share their grievances. Others treated me with thinly veiled suspicion, wondering whose side I was really on. Through it all, Chloe remained a constant presence in the background. Though we hadn't interacted much during my initial tenure at Crestwood, our paths inevitably crossed now that I was back in the spotlight. At first, she seemed genuinely curious about my sudden reappearance, inviting me to lunch under the guise of catching up. But as the weeks went by, her demeanor shifted. There was an edge to her questions, a calculated probing that left me uneasy. "You know," she remarked during one such encounter, swirling her wineglass idly, "people are saying you're up to something big. Something that might shake things up around here." I forced a smile, refusing to rise to the bait. "Just doing my part to help the company succeed. Isn't that what we're all here for?" Chloe studied me for a moment, her sharp eyes searching for cracks in my armor. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just biding your time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Her words lingered long after our meeting ended, planting seeds of doubt in my mind. Did she suspect what I was planning? And if so, how far would she go to protect her father's legacy? Despite the tension, I couldn't ignore the undeniable connection between us. Beneath her polished exterior, Chloe was fiercely intelligent and deeply passionate about the company, a trait I both admired and envied. In another life, we might have been allies instead of adversaries. But in this one, our fates were intertwined in ways neither of us could fully comprehend. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, I realized that this wasn't just about revenge or vindication. It was about justice. For myself, for the countless others who'd been wronged, and perhaps even for Crestwood itself. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face it head-on. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how precarious Crestwood's foundation truly was. Beneath its glossy exterior of success and innovation lay a web of mismanagement, favoritism, and unchecked ambition. It wasn't just Richard Hartwell's leadership that had created this mess. It was a culture he'd cultivated over decades, one where loyalty to him trumped competence, and results mattered far more than ethics. But as I gathered evidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe was watching me like a hawk. She didn't confront me directly again after our lunch, but her presence became impossible to ignore. She'd show up unexpectedly in meetings I attended, linger just a little too long outside my office, or send emails asking for updates on projects she had no real reason to care about. It was subtle, not enough to accuse her of anything outright, but it made me paranoid all the same. One evening, as I sifted through financial reports late into the night, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lila," came a voice I instantly recognized, Chloe's. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. "About what?" "Not over the phone," she said sharply. "Meet me at the rooftop lounge downtown. Now." I hesitated. This could be a trap, or worse, an attempt to intimidate me into backing off. But something about her tone told me I couldn't afford to ignore her request. Grabbing my coat, I headed out into the cool night air. When I arrived, Chloe was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 glasses of whiskey waiting. She gestured for me to sit, her expression unreadable. "I know what you're doing," she began without preamble. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You think you can take down my father because you got fired? Because you feel like you deserve better?" I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off. "Don't bother denying it. I've seen your interviews, your notes. You're gathering dirt, trying to build a case against him. But let me make one thing clear. If you think destroying him will somehow fix everything wrong with this company, you're dead wrong." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because they weren't true, they were, but because hearing them from her stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. "And what exactly do you propose?" I shot back, my voice sharper than intended. That we keep letting him run this place into the ground while people like you reap the rewards. For the first time, her composure faltered. You don't know anything about me, she snapped. Yes, I'm his daughter, but I've worked my ass off to get where I am. Every deal I closed, every sale I made, I earned those. And contrary to what you might believe, I actually care about this company. More than you realize. There was genuine pain in her eyes, and for a moment, I saw past the polished facade she always wore. Underneath it all, Chloe wasn't just the entitled boss's daughter. She was someone who carried the weight of expectations and struggled to prove herself in a world that doubted her every move. But you're right about one thing, she continued, softer now. This company is broken. My dad's decisions have hurt a lot of people, including me. But tearing him down isn't going to fix it. If anything, it'll make things worse. I stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to argue, to tell her she was delusional if she thought Richard Hartwell could ever change. But another part, a quieter, more cautious part, wondered if she might be onto something. Was revenge really worth the collateral damage? What are you suggesting? I asked finally. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. Work with me. Help me find a way to hold him accountable without burning Crestwood to the ground. Together, we can push for real change from the inside. It was a risky proposition. Trusting Chloe meant putting aside years of resentment and doubt, not to mention risking everything I'd worked so hard to uncover. But deep down, I knew she was right about one thing. Removing Richard wouldn't magically solve the company's problems. Someone else would step into his shoes, and the cycle would continue unless the system itself changed. Fine, I said slowly. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. No secrets, no games. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Deal. Over the next few weeks, Chloe and I formed an uneasy alliance. By day, I continued working with the board, presenting them with carefully curated evidence of Richard's missteps. By night, Chloe and I brainstormed strategies to reform the company's structure, focusing on transparency, accountability, and employee empowerment. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, when mistrust threatened to derail everything we'd built. But gradually, we found common ground, not just in our goals but in our shared frustration with a system that rewarded power over principle. The turning point came during a high-stakes board meeting. Armed with irrefutable data and testimonies, I presented my findings, painting a damning picture of Richard's leadership. The room fell silent as I spoke, the weight of the truth sinking in. When I finished, Chloe stood up. What Lila has shown us today isn't just proof of failure. It's an opportunity, she said, her voice steady and commanding. An opportunity to rebuild Crestwood into something stronger, fairer, and more sustainable. But that starts with holding ourselves accountable, not just my father, but all of us. Her speech struck a chord. One by one, members of the board began nodding in agreement. Even those loyal to Richard couldn't deny the evidence staring them in the face. When the vote was called, the decision was unanimous. Richard Hartwell would step down as CEO, effective immediately. As the news spread throughout the company, a mix of shock and relief rippled through the ranks. For many, it felt like the end of an era, but for others, including myself, it marked the beginning of something new. In the months that followed, Chloe took on a temporary leadership role, overseeing the transition while the board searched for a permanent replacement. Under her guidance, sweeping reforms were implemented. Pay equity audits, diversity initiatives, and programs designed to empower mid-level employees. Slowly but surely, Crestwood began to transform. As for me, I stayed on as a senior advisor, helping shape the company's future while mentoring the next generation of leaders. It wasn't the glamorous executive position I'd once dreamed of, but it was something better. Something meaningful.